Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. The US and Iran agreed to hold talks in Oman on Friday despite sharp differences over the scope of negotiations. Washington seeks to include Iran's missile program, while Tehran says only its nuclear file is on the table. Envoys from Russia and Ukraine meet in Abu Dhabi for US-brokered talks on ending the war. The meeting comes as a Russian cluster munitions attack kills 7 people at a market in Ukraine. Trump says China is considering boosting purchases of US soybeans after what he calls positive talks with Xi Jinping. Beijing may raise buying to 20 million tons, even as it warns Washington over Taiwan arms sales. Taiwan says the Trump-Xi phone call will help stabilize regional security amid rising Chinese military pressure. Beijing calls for mutual respect with Washington while warning over Taiwan. New York City joins the World Health Organization's Global Outbreak Response Network after Trump withdraws the US from the agency. The move by Democratic leaders defies the president and seeks to maintain global health cooperation. The UN chief calls the expiry of the New START treaty a grave moment for global peace and security. He urges the US and Russia to quickly negotiate a new nuclear arms control framework. Donald Trump endorses conservative prosecutor Clay Fuller in a Georgia special election to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene. Trump calls Fuller an America First patriot and a strong supporter of his MAGA agenda. Ukraine's energy minister warns power cuts could intensify in the coming days. He says Russia may launch new air attacks on power and heating networks. Those are the headlines for the hour. We start with our top story. World leaders attended a ministerial meeting on critical minerals hosted by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Rubio said 55 countries attended the talks in Washington, all with varying refining or mining capabilities. Meanwhile, US Vice President J.D. Vance unveiled plans to marshal allies into a preferential trade bloc for critical minerals, proposing coordinated price floors as Washington escalates efforts to loosen China's grip on minerals crucial to advanced manufacturing. Rubio stated that building a trade bloc was crucial to preventing any one country or an international crisis from disrupting supply chains. President Donald Trump's administration has stepped up efforts to secure US supplies of critical minerals after China rattled senior officials and global markets last year by withholding rare earths required by American automakers and other industrial manufacturers. Let's in fact listen in to what Rubio and J.D. Vance had to say.
We have 55 partners that we're hoping to enter into collaboration with. Many have already signed on, and the goal here is very simple. We all understand that having a reliable global supply chains and critical minerals and processed and finished materials are critical to everything we do, as I pointed out in my opening statements to the group. And I think this is a broader mistake made by the industrialized and developed world, as we all sort of fell in love with the design of these things, but forgot that in order to design something, you have to be able to build it. And in order to build it, you have to have the fundamental materials necessary to make it with. That's the key goal of a critical mineral supply. And today it's heavily concentrated in the hands of one country. And that lends itself to, at worst case scenario, being used as a tool of leverage in geopolitics, but it also lends itself to any sort of disruptions, like a pandemic or anything that could political instability.
And on Monday, the Trump administration announced Project Vault, America's first ever domestic critical minerals stockpile. With these moves, we intend to build an ironclad network of new industrial supply chains to span the entire nation. We're going to create good paying jobs, skilled jobs for the American labor force, and those people, those great workers, are going to be securing a new era of prosperity for American families, and I believe for many people all over the world.
Andrew K.P. Leung joins us now, a China strategist joining us live from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us. This, of course, is in response to China's dominant and growing rare earth capabilities. How will Beijing be looking at this summit, and will it be in any way threatened by it?
Well, I think that China was forced to resort to using its dominance on rare earths to counter President Trump's coercion. It's not as if China just uses mineral dominance just to get what it wanted in the first place, because the whole thing was sparked off by Trump's tariffs and by Trump's coercion, and in fact, is predatory tactics using the dominance of the U.S. dollar, the U.S. military, to cover other countries into submission. However, the China's dominance over the rare earths supply chain did not happen on day one. It was the result of decades of Western countries outsourcing the processing of these rare earth minerals to China because they are highly polluting, some of them even radioactive. But they are all very, very complicated because it depends on the final product. Each product requires different minerals, and each different minerals require different, very intricate, as I said, often polluting processes. And all these skills and technologies and the supply chain gradually coalesce over decades and at great pain to China. For example, the environmental costs and so on, to be able to reach this position. And of course, this position was at the background, and China was forced to resort to it. Now, President Trump's plan is to rally the rest of the world to form a kind of alliance. This is understandable, but then, as I said, it's not the supply, because minerals you can find a great deal, even within the United States and also in Australia, in Ukraine, and other countries. It's not as if the world lacks minerals, but even though the supply, of course, at the moment is concentrated in China to the extent of about 60%, but then the dominance is in the processing. The final processes, because even before this trade war, a lot of the minerals were exported, rare earth minerals exported from the United States, because, as I said, the United States has rare earths as well, for processing in China. So this situation is unlikely to change anytime soon. But however, this alliance, of course, is the first step. It would pave the way for exchange information, to continue the coordinate efforts to develop these alternative supplies, and of course to hone the skills. But this is unlikely to result in concrete improvements, over weeks. It's likely to take years and if not decades.
Andrew, do you think that any singular nation or even this trade bloc could soon rival that of China's? And why has it taken the United States and other allies to come to this realization that rare earth capabilities are really driving and at the forefront of trade, modern trade?
Well, it's just that if you have a situation which is normal, you tend to forget about it because the rare earths, as I said, were all processed in China. And even though the rare earths came from other countries, including the United States, they were exported to China for processing. And the processing very, very complicated and highly polluting. But that nothing happened and nothing adverse happened. So this was taken for granted until China was forced to resort to this as a countermeasure. And of course, it's not just against the United States, stopping the rare earth to be exported to the United States as a countermeasure, but because you can't just stop the export of rare earths, processed rare earths, just to the United States if you allow the export to Americans' allies, because those allies could re-export the rare earths to the United States. And hence, China recently imposed a global management system requiring the application and grant of permits the world over. And this is, again, it's not suggests that China is targeting the other allies, but to maintain strict control over rare earths as an effective countermeasure. And China has no other means of achieving of using this as a countermeasure unless it has a global kind of control system, and that's just what happened. And of course, with a global control, other countries will be affected as well.
Do stay with us as we turn to our next story, and we head to the Indian subcontinent. And India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent following the trade deal announced by President Donald Trump. The two sides discussed a range of issues aimed at strengthening US-India ties. At the meeting, both countries agreed to formalize cooperation on critical minerals, a move seen as essential to securing supply chains for emerging technologies. Jaishankar also underlined the challenge of excessive concentration in the supply of these critical minerals and expressed India's support for US initiatives to de-risk these chains. The discussions included several key topics such as trade, nuclear cooperation, defense and technology. Jaishankar said both sides agreed to hold early meetings to advance these shared interests. These meetings came just days after a call between US President Donald Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announcing new economic and trade moves. Andrew KP Leung joins us once again. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us. Are Washington-New Delhi relations now thawed out completely, given that, of course, we saw a bit of friction between the governments and the administrations in India and the United States alike? Is this new horizons for that relationship?
Well, this is a manifestation of calibration and recalibration because the whole world order and the whole world trading system have been totally torn apart by President Trump's predatory hegemony, using its unilateral coercive dominance to extract benefits from not only from adversaries but from allies as well, including tariffs and other measures. So you can see that the European Union is recalibrating its relationship with India, just having signed a mother of all free trade agreement with India. You can say that you can see that the United Kingdom Prime Minister is visiting China. And of course, the United States wants to force India to cease buying oil from Russia and to buy more stuff from the United States. And India, of course, is now pushed into the situation of finding its feet, recalibrating relationship with the European Union, but also not making itself an enemy of Russia, but also trying to mend defenses with President Trump. And hence, this deal, this trade deal between the United States and India, which after all would mandate India to buy a lot of stuff from the United States. So I think that from the point of view of the United States, it sees another win for President Trump. From the point of view of India, it says that it is seen as a recalibration of relationships around the world, rather than just be held to hostage by President Trump's recent policies.
What do you think spurred this deal on? Of course, this comes as India and the European Union signed a new trade deal, and of course, a flurry of visits from Western allies to China. Do you think that pushed Washington towards this deal?
I think what's pushing this deal recently is against President Trump, the Trump administration's obsession with its vulnerability to rare earths, and hence this trade deal also tries to bring India on board on processing rare earths, and also in defense, because the United States doesn't want to be pushed out of the Asia Pacific entirely, and hence wants to double down on its military alliance with a number of countries, including India, Australia, Japan, South Korea, as an offshore balancing against China, while pivoting towards the Western Hemisphere.
Okay, Andrew K.P. Leung, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. It's a great pleasure to have you on the programme, as always. We move now to some breaking news, and Russia's ambassador to the United States, Dmitriev, has called the latest meetings between Russia and the US in Abu Dhabi a positive step towards restoring diplomatic relations. Despite pressure from European Union and UK officials, Dmitriev noted significant movement and progress on a potential peace deal. He added that active efforts are underway to strengthen and restore relations between the two countries, which have been strained in recent years. This development comes amid global efforts to resolve tensions and engage in diplomatic talks, with both sides working to overcome difficulties and rebuild a stable relationship. Let's turn to the United States next, and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has stated that the US is ready to meet with Iran this week, but any talks must include discussions on the country's missile and nuclear programs. Rubio said the US is prepared to meet if Iran agrees to engage, but noted that the format for the meeting could still be subject to change. He added that the Iranians had expressed interest in meeting and talking, but any meaningful discussions would have to address Iran's ballistic missiles, terrorist sponsorship, nuclear program, and human rights issues. The US is expected to finalize plans for the meeting, which may take place in Oman on Friday. Let's listen in to what Marco Rubio had to say on the issue.
Look, I think in order for talks to actually lead to something meaningful, they will have to include certain things. And that includes the range of their ballistic missiles. That includes their sponsorship of terrorist organizations across the region. That includes the nuclear program, and that includes the treatment of the... And obviously beyond that, the president retains a number of options to how he responds to that and future events. But as far as the talks are concerned, I think the Iranians had agreed to a certain format. For whatever reason, it's changed in their system or what have you. We'll see if we can get back to the right place. But the United States is prepared to meet with them. I think it was scheduled for Friday. Steve is ready to go. He'll be prepared for that. If the Iranians want to meet, we're ready. They've expressed an interest in meeting and talking. If they change their mind, we're fine with that too. We prefer to meet and talk.
This comes as those talks are scheduled for Friday in Muscat, Oman, as Donald Trump's so-called armada waits in the Persian Gulf at the possibility of US military action in Iran. Joining us now is Major General Gigi Davidi, a professor of international relations and strategic studies. He joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, Major General, this is all about trust, a thing which is very much not present between these two powers. The United States, of course, struck their nuclear bases at the end of that 12-day war with Israel last year. And now, of course, Donald Trump mulling over military action at a time where Iran's regime, according to analysts, is at its weakest. Given the United States' demands and Iran's statements that only nuclear talks are on the table, do you see these talks, if they are to take place, of having any positive outcome whatsoever?
Well, Thomas, you are right, absolutely, that the degree of mistrust between US and Iran is very, very wide, and there's no commonality or meeting point between the two. In fact, these talks also, as Marco Rubio had stated, that there's a difference of perspective or positions. And even the agenda of talks that is concerned, because Iran only wants the talks to be restricted to the nuclear issues, whereas America wants the scope to be widened and to include beyond nuclear issues like Iranian missile program, which is very robust. Incidentally, Iran has a arsenal of 3,000 odd missiles, and some of them have range over around 3,000 kilometers, which is a serious concern for the Americans. And beyond that, they also want the Iranians to commit to rein in these proxy, non-state actors like Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas. And of course, the human rights issues, which is very important because the current tension has been triggered by the hard, heavy-handed approach that are adopted by the Iranian regime to put down the student protest, and which has resulted in thousands of people killed and also taken into custody. So the point is, Thomas, that talks are taking place. That's a positive sign. Whether they will go ahead, that's a big question mark, because the perspectives and position taken by the two sides do not actually align with each other, and therefore, and there's a big question mark whether the talks will result in any positive outcome. But the other side, flip side, is the talks are taking place. That's very important because the tension is very high in the region with Abraham Lincoln-based Armada, which is anchored in the waters of the West Asia. Thomas.
And of course, talks ended previously. They also took place in Oman with the start of the 12-day war. But the stances remained that Iran wanted to keep its ability to enrich uranium, something that the United States said was completely off the table. Do you think this is still negotiable? And of course, we have to look at the other factors here, the sponsorship of proxies across the Middle East, of course, the likes of, you've mentioned, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and of course its ballistic missiles. Which of these sticking points do you think is the most negotiable, and which one do you think is completely off the table for Iran in these talks?
Well, Thomas, if we go back a little point in time, in 2015, there was the agreement signed, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action between the P5+1 Germany, but the Americans of, I would say most specifically President Trump, pulled out of it in 2018. And because as per President Trump, the Iranians are not actually complying with the safeguards and also the terms of reference of the talks. Now the talks are again back on the table, and rightly you mentioned that in June last year, joint operations were carried out by Israel, that was the Rising Lion, and by America, that was the Midnight Hammer. And they did engage the Iranian nuclear installations, because at the time it was felt that possibly Iran is very close to fabricating a nuclear bomb. But the point today is the nuclear issue is, of course, one of the highly sticking point, and in that, America wants Iran to surrender all the enriched uranium so that they don't have any capability to further enrich the uranium and also take forward the nuclear program. And secondly, of course, is the missiles, because the ballistic missiles that Iran has today, they have a range of almost 3,000 kilometers, and that can hit a number of bases of America in the Middle East. And alongside are the proxies. Proxies are actually the, what I can say, they complement the Iranian defense effort, and they need also to be reined in because they are a major concern. And lastly, new dimension have been added, that is the protests that took place and the American desire, at least if not overtly, but inwardly, to change the current regime. So therefore, I think Iranians are actually in the corner. If they don't comply, then they face the threat of a direct engagement by America. That's why America has, gathered all the forces to ensure that Iranians are brought on the table on their terms under a shadow of deterrence. Thomas.
Major General Gigi Davidi, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time and joining us. It's always a great pleasure to speak to you on these issues. We turn over to East Asia next, and Taiwan has welcomed US President Donald Trump's call with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, saying it will help stabilize the region as China increases military pressure on the island. Taiwanese Deputy Foreign Minister Cheng Ming-chi made the remarks hours after Chinese state media reported that Xi had called for mutual respect in strengthening relations with Washington, while also issuing a warning about selling weapons to Taiwan. Let's in fact listen in to what the Deputy Foreign Minister has said.
I think that the only concern that going to impact the future arms sale is about our opposition party's attitude toward the arms sale, toward the defense budget. I think that's the most important, since that the U.S. has already promised to sell us to Taiwan a certain amount of weapons. This is very important for us to acquire those capabilities. But the problem is that so far we haven't seen any cooperation from the legislative end yet.
Qualcomm and ARM are facing mounting pressure as a global memory shortage disrupts the production of advanced chips, adding to challenges already caused by weak smartphone demand. Sales of smartphone processors have fallen short of expectations as consumers delay handset upgrades amid economic uncertainty. The shortage of critical memory components has further slowed the rollout of AI-enabled smartphones, affecting supply chains across the semiconductor industry. While demand for artificial intelligence remains strong in data centers and cloud computing, the slowdown in the mobile segment has hit chip makers heavily exposed to smartphones. Industry analysts say a recovery will depend on improved memory supplies and a rebound in consumer demand later this year. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.